Hey everybody, welcome to Live on Wednesdays. I am today talking about antibiotics, adaptogens, the microbiome, what the effect of those two things are on them. Are they the same? Are they different? And so let's just start out with antibiotics as an example. So I'm sure there's not a single person here who hasn't had an antibiotic in their lifetime. And most of the time, we are instructed to take a probiotic during the course of the antibiotic, or at least to amp it up after the antibiotic is finished. And why is that? It is because antibiotics are not selective. Whatever bacteria is in there, it is attacked. Whatever the purpose of that antibiotic is, it's going to attack the good and the bad of your gut flora, which is your microbiome, part of your microbiome. So, how is that different from adaptogens? Adaptogens are going to be products that give your body what it needs at the time. So it either increases or decreases, to bring it into balance. So, in other words, they are selective as to what they destroy. So let me give you some examples. And why is this important? Because your gut or your microbiome is the most densely populated organ in your human body. And when it's in balance, it helps everything in your body function properly. So they influence other things. The bacteria, the gut microbes, influence every other things within your body. As an example, your metabolism, adiposity, which is obesity, maturation, modulation of the immune system. So it affects your immune system, it affects your brain function, which means it's going to affect your decision making. So clearly what's happening in our gut is super important to our overall wellness, okay? So it has the power to not only influence the intestinal immune responses, because we know that a big portion of our immunity is in our gut, but it also can affect inflammation in remote areas. As an example, your respiratory tract. And I know that's true because years ago I used to get respiratory infections, congestion, whatever you want to call it, like bronchitis, whatever. Every month I would have this. And my acupuncturist at the time said that your lungs, anything up here, is directly related to your gut. So, and how true that statement is. So it can also impact mood and behavior, because what goes in our gut translates into hormones. As an example, our intestinal microbes are primarily responsible for the conversion of tryptophan, which is an amino acid which comes from the food that we eat, the conversion of tryptophan to serotonin. Serotonin is the hormone that helps control our mood and sleep. So if our gut environment is all messed up, guess what? So can be our mood. So can be our sleep. So what are some things then that can adversely alter our microbiome? I've already mentioned antibiotics, whether it be from overuse, extended use. It can be associated with increased risk of obesity, type 1 and 2 diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, allergies, asthma, low-level inflammation. All these things can be attributed to antibiotic use. Another thing that can affect our microbiome is stress. It is a major contributor to intestinal dysbiosis. And what's interesting is that it can be passed on from parent to child. Because stress alters your digestion. It alters the gastric secretions, which means you're not going to be digesting and breaking down the food that you have, which means all of those little chemical reactions that should be taking place in your gut and all of the absorption of nutrients that should be taking place in your gut will not happen. And then things start to slow down, and then you have motility or peristalsis issues where things are not moving through the gut. And then we have lower hemisphere backup. Southern hemisphere plumbing backup, as I refer to it. The second thing that stress can contribute to is it causes people to reach for their comfort foods. How many comfort foods are healthy? Right? So when we reach for those comfort foods, what's going to happen? We're just going to add insult to injury there, folks. The third thing that can happen with stress is that our stress hormones can directly affect the growth of microbial populations. That means when we are in fight or flight, those chemicals involved in that, like norepinephrine, will increase the growth of not only the good bacteria, but also the bad bacteria, such as E. coli. E. coli should be in your gut. It is a good bacteria when it's kept in check. But when it gets out of balance and grows, it is no longer a good bacteria. It is then a pathogen. Another thing that can greatly impact your gut, your microbiome, alcohol consumption, tobacco exposure. Now that doesn't mean you have to be a smoker, but maybe you are exposed to it. You know, that secondhand smoke, it's like, it's bad. Right? They recognize that now. Having a sedentary behavior is another thing that impacts. If you want things to move, including the southern hemisphere plumbing, if you want it to move, you need to move. You need to keep moving to have it moving. Also, highly processed and fast foods negatively impact your gut. Sleep is another one. Not getting enough of sleep. It disrupts the way your organs function when they regenerate themselves. It disrupts that whole pattern. Also, our lifestyle, habits of hygiene. In other words, the products that we use in our daily, day-to-day activities, whether it be detergents, personal care products, soaps, moisturizers, cosmetics, they all alter the microbiome. Now, why would that be? I mean, we're just putting that on our skin or we're breathing it in. Well, guess what? When you breathe something in, it goes into your bloodstream. And where does that all go? I mean, it goes to every part of your body, including your gut. It affects your microbiome. I know. So, now I'm going to focus on some studies. I'm going to focus now on adaptogens, and in particular, I'm going to focus on essential oils. Essential oils are known to be antimicrobial. Antibiotics are antimicrobial. Does that make them antimicrobiome? So, because antibiotics only are not selective, they're not necessarily great for the microbiome. In other words, they are antimicrobial. Essential oils have been found to be selective, to have a selective effect on the microbiome. Not only can they inhibit the growth of potential pathogens, but at the same time they can promote beneficial bacteria. So I'm just going to go through, I'm not going to name each study because there's just so many of them, to be honest with you. But each thing that I mention here is from a study. So the first one was with sweet orange essential oil, which was found to increase the prevalence of microbes such as bifidobacteria, while at the same time reducing levels of gut endotoxin. Endotoxins are things that can trigger systemic inflammation. They can set the stage for insulin resistance, lipidemia, diabetes, obesity. So reducing that, but at the same time increasing the good bacteria, bifidobacteria. Okay. Also, the sweet orange oil protected the gut barrier by increasing the prevalence of other friendly bacteria, which resulted in weight loss in obese rats, which is what the study was done on. Now, on another study, certain constituents of essential oils were found to be beneficial, such as carvacrol and thymol. Those two were found, I mean, they're found in a lot of things, but they used in this study in high concentrations in oregano, thyme, and wild bergamot. And you've maybe heard me speak about oregano and thyme as being beneficial for some other things as well. So these had an increase in beneficial bacteria while at the same time decreasing the potential pathogens. Specifically lactobacillus increased with the use of these oils, while enterobacteria caused it to decrease. That specific bacteria is associated with food poisoning. So things like E. coli, which I just mentioned earlier, E. coli, Salmonella, and Shigella. Okay? The other thing that carvacrol and thymol helped to do was to shift the microbial balance in the gut to one where it promoted energy absorption. Which meant it promoted carbohydrate metabolism, amino acid metabolism, lipid metabolism, protein biosynthesis. These are all things that we want to happen in the gut. Also, by using these oils, oregano, thyme, and wild bergamot, with those constituents, carvacrol and thymol, it increased the short chain fatty acids. I've talked about short chain fatty acids before. They are the fuel for energy that the cells that line the colon use. So short chain fatty acids are essential for healthy cells that line the colon, that help them to do what they need to do to get that energy going. So this means that it protects against colonic diseases and also help to inhibit and also they exhibit anti-inflammatory effects. So there's a lot of powerful stuff that these are doing. Another study showed that these constituents, caraval and thymol, promoted resistance to infection, improved antioxidant status, and barrier function. And they were found to reduce the amount of potential pathogens with E. coli and Clostridium while increasing the number of lactobacillus. In a 2018 study, an essential oil blend of eucalyptus, oregano, thyme, and sweet orange that was added to the feed of rainbow trout, it didn't necessarily affect their gut microbiome, but what happened is kind of interesting. What happened is that it decreased the oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is like a major player in causing chronic inflammation. So anything that can reduce oxidative stress is like huge. It's your antioxidants is what it is. And so even though it didn't make changes in the gut microbiome, reducing the oxidative stress is in the long run going to help it anyway. It's going to help your entire body. It's going to reduce that inflammation. I just thought that was awesome. 2012, there was a study on lavender oil in mice with acute ulcerative colitis caused by the specific bacteria, Citrobacter rodentium. And by using the lavender oil, it decreased morbidity and mortality. It reduced intestinal tissue damage and decreased infiltration of specific white blood cells, neutrophils, macrophages. But it also decreased cytokines. And cytokines are the things that happen in autoimmune diseases where they call it a flare. You have a flare of symptoms that happen. They call it a cytokine storm. So that was reduced. Regulatory T cell populations were increased. So it promoted the prevalence of good bacteria, inhibited pathogens, and of this ulcerative colitis in mice. In 2015, there was a study using human fecal stool fermentations and using thymol and geraniol. And they determined that it was capable of suppressing pathogens in the small intestine without interfering with the good, beneficial colonic bacteria. And this is in humans now, human cells, human material. Another study that was done, published in the Alternative Medicine Review, there's 8 different essential oils that were used on 12 species of common human intestinal bacteria. And out of that study, they found that caraway, lavender, Ajowan caraway, and neroli demonstrated a high degree of selectivity inhibiting the growth of potential pathogens while leaving the good, the beneficial bacteria unaffected, completely unaffected. So there's certainly potential here for essential oils as adaptogens to be able to balance out what our body needs at the time. So if it needs to increase your good, it helps to do that. If it needs to decrease that bad stuff, it helps to do that, and they can do it at the same time. So the important thing that we can, hopefully the takeaway here is that we don't see the same negative bowel outcomes with antimicrobial essential oils that we see with antibiotics. And that difference may be due to the capacity of essential oils to selectively inhibit those potential pathogens while allowing the beneficial bacteria to flourish. So I'm just going to quote what was in an article. It said, antibiotics are the nuclear approach, the everything killers of the biological realm. They are literally anti-life. Our antimicrobial attitude and our mistreatment of the living world has led to devastating dysbiosis, a crisis of inflammatory disease, and the lost quality of life. The overuse of antibiotics has been shown to create superbugs that no longer respond, quite frankly, to antibiotics. Now, I'm not saying don't go use antibiotics. I had to use an antibiotic recently. It's something, we sometimes need to use them if we need to get a quick response or to get a handle on things right away. Although there are other studies from the PubMed and government sites that have shown that some essential oils have been able to even kill, like MRSA, within minutes. So there are a lot of benefits to finding a balance, and each person has to decide what route's going to be best for them. But hopefully this has given you a little bit of food for thought and has shown you another side of essential oils that is not just for aromatic purposes, because if you have a good quality essential oil like Young Living, it is absolutely far more than aromatic and good to smell. Now, hopefully you can go out there and enjoy the rest of the day and go be awesome.